Being able to spend every day with my family is the nicest aspect of my profession. Working with my family is the worst aspect of my job. It appeared as though Corey Harrison had everything under control: notoriety, wealth, and a multi-million-dollar family enterprise. Behind the cameras, however, his life was unraveling in ways that no one could have predicted. In ways unrelated to the shop, he was already battling for his life at the age of 26. His own family would be shocked by the desperate choices he was making by the age of 30. He would finally be broken by the weight of secrets, broken relationships, and tragic family events. Everything changed after that, and is worse than you might imagine. On April 27, 1983, Corey Harrison was born in Las Vegas. The gold and silver pawn shop, which his grandpa co-founded and his parents, Rick and Kim, operated, was already owned by his family. Corey wasn't your typical child growing up in a typical household from the beginning. He was born into what would grow to be one of the world's most well-known pawn shops. Corey grew up surrounded by the soft hum of transactions, treasure appraisals, and family conflicts simmering behind the counter, while the city surrounding him was a flurry of casinos and neon lights. On April 27, 1983, Corey Harrison was born in Las Vegas. The gold and silver pawn shop, which his grandpa co-founded and his parents, Rick and Kim, operated, was already owned by his family. Corey wasn't your typical child growing up in a typical household from the beginning. He was born into what would grow to be one of the world's most well-known pawn shops. Corey grew up surrounded by the soft hum of transactions, treasure appraisals, and family conflicts simmering behind the counter, while the city surrounding him was a flurry of casinos and neon lights. The store served as more than just a workspace. It was the lifeblood of the family, and before Corey realized the gravity of it, he was already in the center of it. Corey stopped watching cartoons when he was 9 years old. He was arranging shelves, polishing jewelry, and keeping a tight eye on his grandfather and father. They taught him how to recognize people, their tells, their tricks, and their truths. In addition to teaching him how to recognize gold and silver, Corey was learning to discern value not just in dollars, but in character at a time when most children were still learning the fundamentals of math. He was managing actual sales by the age of 12. A few of the adult patrons were completely unaware that a child was handling their transaction, till they left with less cash than they had anticipated. It was hardly a stroke of luck. Like a sponge, Corey had been taking up everything. Additionally, he had more practical business experience by the time he was a teenager than many recent college graduates. Even the staff was taken aback by Corey's ability to recognize rare coins, military artifacts, and vintage guitars at the age of 13. He had a talent for recognizing genuineness and knowing what things were really worth. The shop staff began to notice that Corey's calls typically paid off. He possessed what his grandfather referred to as the eye. No magic was involved. Thousands of hours were spent observing, touching, learning, and posing queries. By the age of 16, he was spending thousands on store purchases and was trusted with important decisions. Even when his opinions didn't align with others, he proved to be correct most of the time. However, it wasn't easy to grow up in that limelight. Corey was more than just a grandchild or son. Everyone recognized that he was the company's future. His father, Rick, didn't treat him well and required him to put in more effort than everybody else. Family ties meant nothing unless you proved yourself, he made clear. Although he was different, the elderly man was equally demanding. Under the watchful eyes of patrons and employees, Corey had to meet both of their expectations. Every family dispute over a choice or agreement took place in public. He was already feeling the effects of the pressure by the time he was 17. He began to resist, but the tension just increased. Later, those cracks would become must-watch television. The moniker Big Hoss wasn't coined by accident. At 16, Corey weighed more than 400 pounds and was 6 feet tall. Although he was difficult to notice due to his size, the term stuck because of his developing leadership. Rick began referring to him as such, not just as a joke, but also because it was obvious that he was rising to the position of boss in the shop. Because they knew he could provide a better offer or a quicker decision, customers began to ask for him personally. Workers twice his age began to trust his judgment. Size was no longer the only factor in the name. It has to do with being there. The burden on his shoulders increased along with his role. Corey was already managing a portion of the store by the time he was in his mid-teens. Even though he was still in high school, he was confidently dealing customers, managing inventory, and negotiating expensive purchases outside of the classroom. There were more than 30 workers in the gold and silver pawn shop. Many of them were older and more seasoned. Every day, Corey had to prove himself. Corey continued to step up as his father gave him greater responsibility, but it came at a price. Corey was in the back office making deals and learning the hard way what could go wrong while other students were attending dances or hanging out at the mall. He raised a commotion the first time he made a significant buy without getting everyone's agreement. When Corey enjoyed something, he would often spend a lot of money on it: vintage vehicles, motorbikes, and unique treasures. While some of these products were profitable, others caused controversy. The debates might be noisy in public, and Rick and the elderly guy didn't always agree with his choices. When Pawn Stars eventually aired, these situations made for fantastic television, but they also caused a tremendous deal of stress among the staff and family. Corey didn't hesitate to take chances, and he remained true to his calls, even when things didn't work out. Early on, Corey decided to forego the typical school route. He was learning how to assess the purity of gold and identify Civil War swords, while his classmates were preparing for tests. He was deprived of social events, sports, and leisure time. He received a skill set in exchange, though, that very few individuals his age ever acquire. He didn't have a fancy school credential, but he knew in a matter of seconds the value of a musket from the 19th century. When Pawn Stars became popular, that risk paid off since his specialized knowledge suddenly had value outside of the store. Having a boss at such a young age has its own challenges. Many workers were reluctant to follow commands from a young person. Corey was their manager, and some of them had been there since before Corey was even born. To earn their regard, he had to put forth twice as much effort. He increased the shop floor to 15,000 square feet, simplified inventories, and introduced fresh concepts. Hiring his friend Austin Russell, better known as Chumley, was one of his best decisions. Although no one gave it any attention at the time, that choice influenced the cast and chemistry of the show. Corey managed to strike a balance between managing a legitimate business and entertaining millions of people by assembling a staff that worked for the shop and the cameras. One unforeseen event in 2009 caused the Harrison family's entire life to shift. Somehow, a YouTube video that featured Rick Harrison handling a challenging customer made it to the History Channel. Rick had been trying to sell a pawn shop show to networks for years, but none of them were interested. Then, out of nowhere, producer Nancy Dubuck recognized the family store's potential. HBO had previously considered a dark, late-night version of the show, which was originally proposed as something completely different. However, it was this straightforward video that was unpredictably shared online that set the spark. It didn't simply take off when it made its debut on July 19, 2009. Within a year, it was the network's highest-rated program overall. The only reality TV show with a higher viewership was Jersey Shore. There was no better time to do it. Audiences were intrigued to the image of a family-run pawn shop working through difficult times since the economy was struggling and Las Vegas businesses were under pressure. Corey Harrison didn't behave or look like your average television personality. He didn't have media coaching, was 26 years old, and had never performed before. However, something clicked as soon as the cameras began to roll. Corey had no intention of amusing himself. He simply knew what he was discussing. He began polishing jewels at the shop when he was 9 years old. He had learned everything from scratch over the years. His passion for vintage vehicles, motorcycles, and antiques was genuine. It was authentic, and viewers felt that intensity firsthand. In contrast to his father's strategic calm and his grandfather's solemn tone, he stood out for his easygoing manner and witty sense of humor. By 2010, Corey's admirers were praising him on social media. He was living history, not only narrating it. Every scene felt erratic since he also didn't hesitate to take chances on significant purchases. During one of the most dramatic scenes in the show, that unpredictability peaked. Corey startled his family and the audience with a move in season 7, episode 13. He made it clear to them that if he didn't receive a 10% share in the company, he was prepared to leave. At the age of 28, Corey was overseeing 30 workers and directing day-to-day operations. In addition, he was the one who made the largest purchases for the store. Even so, he had no ownership stake in the business. Beyond receiving a payment, Corey had no involvement in the $3 million annual revenue generated by the company. He was not pleased with that. Competing companies had even approached him with better offers. He wasn't merely threatening to leave. It was born out of genuine frustration. On and off screen, the family had never experienced anything like this, and every unfiltered moment was captured by the cameras. However, tensions were already rising behind the scenes. The popularity of the show only made matters worse. Numerous family disputes were too heated to even broadcast, according to former producers. Corey's extravagant spending, which included a $40,000 motorcycle, caused significant financial strain on the company. There was continual pressure to run a store star in a popular reality show. No days were off. Rick once remarked, "The emotional weight wasn't fake." Corey's demands for ownership on screen weren't just a plotline, they were echoes of real conversations happening behind closed doors. The boundaries between real life and performance started to blur. Even going out to dinner became difficult because fans kept interrupting them. The family finally reached a turning point after years of arduous work and the constant pressure of living in the spotlight. Corey was given a 5% partnership, which was not the full 10, but it came with a sizable raise and the promise of more in the future. For Corey, it was a victory. From being merely an employee, he became a true part owner, and that 5% meant more than just money. It gave him power and enabled him to make significant purchases without constant approval. And given the shop's increasing success, his stake was already worth a substantial amount, positioning him as the company's future face. A different type of wake-up call came next. Corey's instincts, bravery, and loyalty had redefined his role. He wasn't waiting to inherit the family legacy, but rather developing it one difficult conversation at a time. The program wasn't simply documenting entertainment. It was documenting the passing of a torch. When Corey went to the doctor in 2010, he saw a number that would change his life, 402 pounds. However, when his doctor wrote a prescription for diabetes prevention medication, it wasn't just a warning, it was the start of a medical emergency, and Corey realized that his health wasn't just in danger, it was already on the verge of collapse. The medication was a last-ditch attempt to prevent full-blown diabetes because his body had begun to resist insulin. It was then evident that this was about survival, not appearance, because diabetes is more than just a hardship. It can cause vision loss, kidney damage, heart damage, and a decades-long reduction in life expectancy. When Corey realized that he could not wait any longer and that something needed to change quickly, what happened next demonstrated how desperate he had become. He had no money, and the lab-band surgery he required was not covered. So instead of waiting, he made a decision that most people would never even consider. He maxed out 4 different credit cards to pay for it. The decision was a life or death decision that demonstrated how seriously Corey took the threat of diabetes. It's not just a financial risk, it's the kind of move that could ruin someone's future. However, for Corey, the decision was straightforward. Either risk debt or risk death. And he chose debt. The surgery became a symbol of his refusal to let his weight destroy everything he had worked for. 6 weeks later, the results spoke louder than any press release. Corey lost 50 pounds in just a month and a half. which is more than 8 pounds per week. Most doctors would consider this dangerously fast, but for Corey, it was evidence that he had made the right decision. He didn't care about interest rates. He cared about living long enough to enjoy the future he was fighting for. By the end of the first year, he had lost over 150 pounds, but those first 50 were the real game changer, showing him and everyone else that his crazy decision to go into debt was already paying off, giving him the drive and confidence to keep going. His stomach could now only hold a few ounces of food at a time, forcing his body to burn through stored fat. When Corey Harrison got on his motorcycle on April 26, 2014, to get some last-minute supplies for the party his family and friends were throwing at his house, he was riding at 40 miles when the bottom fender mount on his bike unexpectedly broke. Corey Harrison's 30th on his birthday was meant to be a celebration, not a near-death experience. A straightforward errand became a terrifying situation due to a mechanical failure. The motorcycle began spinning out of control, and Corey had only a few seconds to decide whether to crash into a nearby wall or oncoming traffic, or do the unimaginable and jump off the bike while it was still moving. His bike continued to spin until it fell apart, but Corey, bruised and scraped, was alive. And instead of going straight to the emergency room, he made a decision that shocked everyone. It was fast, terrifying, and felt like the only option. At that speed, throwing yourself onto pavement could be fatal, but staying on meant certain disaster. Even though he was still in pain and likely in shock, he went to the party, greeted guests, smiled for pictures, and tried to keep things normal. No one at the party knew what had happened, and he only went to the hospital after playing the part of the birthday host. At the emergency room, doctors found out how much damage had been done. 8 screws and 2 metal plates were put in to hold everything together, after his hand broke so badly that surgery was necessary, and the hardware remained in place forever. Prior to all of this, Corey had fallen in love in high school, meeting Charlene Steele as a teenager, getting married in 2009, and even working together at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop. After their 2015 divorce, Charlene continued to work at the shop for a while, before starting her own online business, selling handmade accessories. But what was surprising was how private the divorce was. There was no drama, no public arguments, no finger pointing, just silence. Charlene was more than just the wife of a reality TV star. She became a part of the shop's everyday life, and that silence only fueled speculation. In 2016, Corey fell in love once more, this time with Karina Harrison, also known as Kiki, who was an executive assistant at a casino in California. Their romance progressed quickly, and on May 26, 2017, they were married in San Diego. Corey was open about his love for Kiki, posting pictures, heartfelt captions, and happy moments on social media. Nevertheless, that joy was short-lived, as in August 2018, only 15 months after the wedding, Corey and Kiki filed for divorce. Kiki was pregnant at the time, and court records revealed that they had already agreed on custody, support, and other matters before filing. Corey's public statement was polite, stating that they still loved each other but were unable to work things out because of their schedules. The timing was emotionally complicated. They were legally divorced but had recently welcomed a baby together. And in October 2018, Kiki gave birth to their son, Richard Benjamin Harrison, named after Corey's grandfather, the man fans knew as the old man on Pawn Stars, who had died only 4 months earlier. It didn't get any easier. In October 2020, Corey rented a 37-foot RV from William Vilifa through RV Share, and he was supposed to return it after 3 days, but he kept it for 6. Corey posted a picture of a tattooed wrist with the name Harrison and a romantic caption. But nothing was verified, and soon they stopped showing up on each other's social media. The RV was a complete wreck when it was finally returned, with the body damaged, the awning torn, and the inside filled with shattered eggs, empty bottles, and sand, not just minor wear and use, but what appeared to be vandalism. Bilafana says the damage to be between $20,000 and $30,000. Despite having a net worth of about $2.6 million, Corey reportedly refused to take responsibility for the damage, refusing to pay for the bodywork alone, which cost about $8,000, and the new awning, which cost another $7,000. He had to cancel 10 reservations because the RV was unusable, which severely hurt his business, especially during the pandemic. Corey's representative said the RV's pop-outs wouldn't retract and that they had insurance, but that didn't explain the state of the interior. The dispute continued, adding more stress to an already chaotic situation, and Vilifano was forced to file a complaint with the North Las Vegas Police Department, an attempt to claim insurance. Then came the DUI arrest. On September 8, 2023, shortly after 2 in the morning, Corey was pulled over by police near Main Street and Charleston Boulevard in Las Vegas. He had just returned from filming in Minnesota and was traveling less than a mile to his apartment when his white Ford 250 began swerving in and out of the bike lane. After failing a field sobriety test, Corey consented to a breathalyzer test after the officer used the public address system to get him to stop. Corey had already pulled his ID out and blamed the swerving on his truck, pulling to the right. But the officer noticed that his eyes were watery and bloodshot, and there was a strong smell of alcohol. Corey later told reporters that he was frustrated that none of the officers had a working breathalyzer and that he had only had one drink during his flight and none after landing. However, the machine was broken when they arrived at the city jail in Las Vegas, so they were unable to use the intoxilizer, and police took a blood sample instead. Richard Harrison, known to fans as the Old Man, passed away on June 25, 2018, at the age of 77. Most people were unaware until the very end that he had been battling Parkinson's disease for years. The results of the blood test were never made public. He was arrested at 2:28 a.m. and released approximately 8 hours later, promising to hire a lawyer and fight the charges. Viewers were unaware that the man who starred in almost 300 episodes of Pawn Stars and helped build the gold and silver pawn shop was deteriorating behind the scenes. He retired in 2017 as the show was hitting new heights of popularity. It was a slow and agonizing battle, and the family kept it largely private. Rick Harrison's homage to his father, which went viral on social media that same day, described him as a teacher, a parent, and a friend. For his family, it had been a lengthy, peaceful farewell, but for fans, it felt abrupt. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Gold and Silver Pawn Shop also released a statement stating Richard passed peacefully, surrounded by loved ones, but nothing could really prepare them. In another post, Rick shared an old photo of his dad when he was young, and he said the old man would be missed not just by the family, but by fans worldwide. Rick also called him his hero. The post received over 245,000 views, and many people could feel the grief in Rick's words. 3 generations had always worked side by side in the shop, but now there were only 2 left. Then came a second heartbreak when Rick's youngest son, 39-year-old Adam Harrison, was discovered dead in a guest house in Las Vegas on January 19, 2024. He hadn't been seen since January 17th, and another resident became concerned when the landlord finally looked around. In the days leading up to his death, Adam had been acting strangely, isolating himself, and acting paranoid. He had also recently been released from jail after serving 3 months. The police report confirmed the tragic discovery that he was unresponsive. The specific charges against him were not disclosed. Adam's family was aware that he had been struggling with addiction for years, but that didn't make it any easier. The coroner's office confirmed the cause of death on February 29, 2024, as fentanyl and methamphetamine toxicity, which is one of the most deadly combinations in the nation today. The death was declared accidental. Over 107,000 Americans lost their lives to drug overdoses in 2021 alone, and synthetic opioids like fentanyl, which is 100 times more potent than morphine and can shut down the body in small doses, accounted for nearly 88% of opioid deaths. Rick didn't mince words when he responded. Corey Harrison, Rick's other son, had his own issues long before Adam's death, and on August 17, 2014, while on a motorcycle tour with Hot Bike magazine, Corey stopped by a bar in Jefferson City, Missouri. He said that the fentanyl crisis is spreading across borders and that no one seems to be stopping it. Adam had become just another number in a growing crisis that continues to take lives every day. At approximately 11:20 that night, everything went completely out of control. He had already partied for 7 nights in a row, continued to drink shot after shot, and, according to witnesses, had not eaten all day. He was already stumbling by the time he reached the second bar, and the bar owner recalled him walking in and thinking this was not going to end well. When the owner witnessed the entire incident, he asked Corey how he would feel if someone entered his pawn shop and did the same thing. Security cameras captured Corey pulling down his pants and peeing on a bar stool in front of everyone. He even gave a thumbs up while posing for photos with his pants down. Photos from that night went viral, and some who were there said Corey had been drinking hard all week. Staff hurried to clean up the mess, but Corey didn't seem to care. When questioned, he hurled a bar stool at the owner, who pushed him against the wall and had him kicked out. After a week of drinking, no food, and non-stop partying, this incident felt inevitable, and it was made worse by Corey's attitude. He didn't look embarrassed. If anything, he looked proud. They describe his behavior as sloppy, loud, and out of control, and one source claimed he was willing to do almost anything that night. Years later, new worries started to emerge. In 2024, during season 22 of Pawn Stars, viewers noticed something odd about Corey's posture, a slouch that appeared painful, and fans started asking online if he had scoliosis. The timing generated curiosity, particularly since Corey had been in a serious motorcycle accident in 2014. Corey's role in the pawn shop also started to change, and he broke his arm and injured his foot and back. At 41, his physical condition seemed to be catching up with him. Photos and appearances from that time showed him looking worn out and exhausted. But the family never publicly addressed the speculation, which added another layer of hardship and loss to a story already full of loss. Rick mentioned a potential reboot, something like Pawn Stars 2.0, but Corey made it clear he wouldn't be involved, saying he couldn't keep pretending he was 23 when he was now 41. Despite this, the show is no longer filming, and after 16 seasons, Pawn Stars has been placed on indefinite pause after the History Channel decided not to renew the contract. After filming concluded in June 2024, he decided to make a big move and moved to Tulum, Mexico, 3 months later. When asked about it, he said he was done and wished everyone luck. He is currently concentrating on a new project in Mexico, working with investors to open a barbecue restaurant called Big Horse's Smoke and Joint. He started Pawn Stars at the age of 26, and after 16 years on TV, he is attempting something new. He left behind the business that made him famous, Las Vegas, and celebrity. It's a huge change from his TV existence.